Great. So again, good evening, everyone. And once again, thank you for joining us today. My name is Shada. I'm an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement, and I'm very happy to be joining you all tonight. I'm joined today with organizers from World Beyond War, from Justice for All Canada, and the Palestine Solidarity Network. We're joined today at a time where we're witnessing a mass slaughter. Today is the 710th day of this genocide. It's been nearly 2 years, and Israel has carried out an unrelenting genocide in Gaza. And right now, at this very moment, we are witnessing one of its most destructive phases of annihilation yet. Gaza City is being flattened, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. Entire residential buildings are being leveled. Families are being buried under rubble. Hospitals are being bombed. Schools are being incinerated. And Gaza City is one of the last remaining places where people are sheltering. And now evacuation orders have been issued for over 1 million people. People who have already fled 5, 10, 20 times over. People who have nowhere left to go. And while the bombs fall from the sky, hunger tightens on those who are still alive. And we are watching in real time a population being starved to death. Every food distribution point, every humanitarian site, every so-called safe zone has become a trap. People line up for literal crumbs and are met with bullets. Aid convoys are bombed. Men, women, children are dying from hunger and infection. And Israel doesn't just kill, it suffocates life itself. And Canada is not watching from afar. Canada is a part of this. Weapons made in this country are still reaching Israel, and the most significant channel is still open, hiding behind a legal loophole. Canadian-made weapon components are being exported to the US without permits, and they're integrated into warplanes and all of the machinery that's being used to decimate Gaza City in this moment. And that is what we're going to talk about today. We're here tonight to expose this loophole, to organize against it, and to shut it down. We've already forced this government to admit its complicity, but the largest and most dangerous export pipeline still remains untouched. And that's the pipeline that we're going to come for next. So tonight, we're going to be walking you through what's happening on the ground, how this loophole operates, and all of the strategies that we're building to close it. And we will fight to shut down every shipment, every loophole, every contract, every bullet, and every plane. And I'll pass it to Rachel from World Beyond War to help us begin.
Thank you so much, Shada, and thank you so much to everyone who's here. We're 270 people, though the numbers keep climbing every minute. Just big appreciation to everyone who's taking the time on a Wednesday evening and a very busy moment in September to be part of this movement call to come together and strategize and figure out what we can do to end Canada's complicity in this genocide. I wanted to start by just getting us all up to speed on where this campaign is at after a very, very busy summer. Looking back a few months during the last federal election in the spring, it was a really telling moment for this campaign. It was really clear, actually, that the Arms Embargo Now campaign and the actions of thousands and thousands of people across the country over the previous year and a half to push for an arms embargo had moved the needle in Canada dramatically. We heard from so many candidates and also other people in the government and also just tons of people across the country. Of course, Canada needs to stop arming Israel, but they also thought Canada has stopped arming Israel. We heard this from sitting members of parliament. We heard this from tons of political candidates. And again, we heard this from allies and sympathetic people on the street we were canvassing. Why did they think that? They thought that because we had indeed forced the Canadian government through our movements, through our actions, through people coming together, truly from coast to coast to coast, over and over and over again, we had actually forced the Canadian government to stop some of their arms exports to Israel, to stop issuing any new permits for these direct exports from Canada to Israel, suspending some of the existing permits, and even more than that, we forced the government to over and over say, Canada must not arm Israel, Canada's not going to arm Israel. We've 100% moved the needle from, oh yes, we're going to arm our biggest ally in the Middle East, Israel, to no, 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 we can't do that. Um, However, we also knew that many Canadian weapons were still flowing to Israel, despite what the government was saying, despite their really excellent propaganda campaign that convinced everyone it wasn't happening. So that was the context in which uh, a bunch of us came together, got our research hats on, recruited some like really incredible movement researchers to put together a report that we launched on a webinar just like this one on, I believe it was July 29th. So just under 2 months ago. In that report, for the first time, we tracked and documented and reported on hundreds of shipments of weapons directly from Canada to Israel. These ranged from everything to do with, for example, the circuit boards that go in Elbit drones to aircraft components that make their way into fighter jets, to materials like antennas and like telecommunications and electronic warfare systems. And really, it was sort of across the board, a huge number of weapon shipments of all different types that had been happening since October 2023 and before, and were continuing to happen. That report, we shared it in our media. We held a press conference on Parliament Hill. You all joined again by like tens of thousands of people across the country, brought that report everywhere, and it was covered by every major media outlet in the country, back-to-back coverage for days on end, and international media as well. It was, I don't have the number in front of me, but a huge number of Canadian senators put out a letter in response. Former Canadian diplomats and ambassadors put out a letter in response. And the government was ultimately forced to put out an official response. The, at that time, pretty new Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, put out a response. Um, Basically trying to convince people like, no, 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 there's no real problem here. You know how they said that these weapons were traveling on commercial jets to get from Canada to Israel under the seats of passengers on Air Canada flights? Don't worry, none of those shipments were explosives. They were just other types of military exports. These were the type of responses the Canadian government had to the report. And the overall statement was, don't worry, Canada is not fueling this conflict, implying, yes, Canada's arming Israel, but don't worry, those weapons are not actually going to Gaza. I won't spend the time here kind of unpacking everything that was wrong with the Canadian government response, but I will say that the media did not buy it either. And all of the reporting on the government's response to our report said, well, you know, there was this report that says this. The government has now said this. It's not clear to us that what the government is saying is accurate. So it was a very successful challenge to their narrative. And really, I think that through all of our combined efforts, it became undeniable that Canada actually is still arming Israel, despite what they are saying. And one thing that also happened is that after this report revealed a lot of things, but then after it came out, the responses also revealed a number of things. So one thing that came out in the government's response, she sort of said, oh, this report refers to a whole bunch of bullets shipments. Actually, Canada is sending training bullets to Israel. So this was a direct admission that this is an ongoing weapons shipment that Canada is doing. But even more than that, this was an admission that they somehow thought training bullets going to the IDF, going to Israel, being used to train Israeli soldiers who are, we know exactly what they're doing with those bullets, right? I think we've all probably seen the footage of these bullets being used to shoot Palestinians who are waiting at food distribution centers point blank, for example. Somehow the Canadian government thought it would be a satisfying response to say, oh, well, actually, we're sending training bullets to Israel, and to think that we would accept that as acceptable. Clearly, this is not acceptable. But clearly, this also points to loopholes in Canadian law, because the thing the government said that was true about this was training bullets. she called them paintball bullets, but they're called simunition, in fact. They're made by General Dynamics in Quebec, and they are training bullets whose only purpose is to train soldiers on using real bullets. Um, these bullets don't require an export permit from Canada. That's what the Canadian government said, and that's true. And that's why our campaign for over a year now has been demanding a full arms embargo on Israel. Not just stop issuing these specific types of military permits, not just pause this bureaucratic process or this, but actually implement a full arms embargo, which would block the flow of all military goods to and from Israel, which absolutely includes training bullets. That's just one example of a type of admission that came out, but I also want to highlight some additional wins that happened after this report came out. First of all, a whole bunch of major new allies and signatories came on board. We've got, I believe, over 450 organizations across the country that have endorsed the demand for an arms embargo, including most recently Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union in the country, the Canadian Labour Congress. It's amazing to have Labour come on board with this demand. And also, we expect to see Labour continuing to take action to say our workers are not actually going to be part of this process. I want to give a big shout out to folks out in BC who led a successful grassroots campaign that led to Burnaby becoming the first city in Canada to sign on to the demand for an arms embargo. And this has led to way more BC cities in the works and has opened the doors to a whole bunch of mass cross-city organizing in BC. These are just a couple examples. One more example I do want to give is that we've continued, and this effort has been led by the incredible research team, the PYM Montreal research team. The Montreal folks at the Palestinian Youth Movement have just been just the most incredible grassroots researchers on this. They've continuing to track these shipments. And when they found another shipment after the report had came out that was about to go out from a company named Calian in Ottawa that makes military antennas, and this was a shipment that was going to go straight, that had just gone through straight to Elbit Systems. Um, we all confronted the company about it. We leaked the information to the CBC. They did a whole expose about it. And ultimately, what happened is that company committed to stop sending their antennas, any of their products, to Elbit Systems anymore. This is another example of, and I could go on, but I wanted to give that example of the types of wins we can have now that this information is out in the open. And frankly, regardless of what the government says about these exports, when we confront the companies, they have been more honest than the government in saying, well, yeah, this is a military export to Israel, and maybe we shouldn't be sending antennas to a country that's committing genocide. We also joined with allies at Science for the People to dig further into another one of the companies that was named in that report called Stelia. This is a company based out in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, and it's a key supplier of parts for the F-35 fighter jet. Science for the People will be putting out a new report about that company and a few others next week, so stay tuned for that. But what we found when we were looking into them is that they had been sending these direct exports of military aircraft parts straight from Lunenburg, unsuspecting cute town, Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, to Elbit factories in Israel. But because of the winds of our campaign, because we had really backed the government in a corner, forced them to stop issuing these export permits, they had actually had to stop. They were no longer able to send those direct exports to Israel, which is excellent. However, what we discovered is because what they were making was a part of a US weapons system, they were actually able to, instead of continuing to send those materials straight to Israel, which they could no longer do, they had instead started sending them down to the US to be received there before then making their way on to Israel. This won't be possible for all the Canadian arms companies who've been sending their weapons directly to Israel, but this is how a majority of weapons at this point are getting from Canada to Israel. So as a bit of a refresher, there's really three facets of the Canada-Israel arms trade. And it's important that we're clear on this because, as we've said, the government is doing everything they can to confuse us all about this. But the first avenue of the Canada-Israel arms trade is those direct exports. So the Canadian companies, they apply for a permit. At this point, most of them are not getting it because we've blocked that permit pathway, but then they would be sending their weapons straight to an Israeli weapons company. Uh, there's still lots to happen there, but that's also where we've had the most progress and where we have forced a lot of action from the Canadian government. But the second part of the Canada-Israel arms trade, the second avenue for the flow of weapons is via what we've been calling the US loophole. So that's when Canadian weapons are exported, or components or parts of weapons or military goods are exported to companies in the US or to the US military or government, and then they're later sent on to Israel. So that can look like, as we've talked about, the F-35 fighter jet, which is built by Lockheed down in Texas. There's millions of dollars of Canadian components in every single one of those jets. They get sent from Canada down to Texas. They get built into this fighter jet, and then they get sent on to Israel, which is using them to drop 2,000-pound bombs on people living in tents. And this is a huge loophole. This is a huge issue. Because these exports don't require any kind of permit. Unlike Canadian weapons sent to literally any other country in the world, the US is the exception under Canadian law. And these weapons aren't tracked, they don't need a permit. They really are not regulated in basically any way. The vast majority of the billions of dollars of weapons Canada sends to the US every year basically disappear into a black hole. And Canada doesn't know, is the US military using them? Are they sending them to Israel, or are they sending them to any other country on earth? So this is a huge problem, and this is the problem that we are going to be talking about, obviously, a lot on this call today. But I will also just remind us of that third aspect before I forget. So the third venue of the Canada-Israel arms trade is the imports. So that's everything that Canada is buying from Israel. This is us putting dollars directly into the hands of the Israeli weapons companies, many of them state-owned Israeli weapons companies that are profiting off of and arming this genocide. And this is an increasingly big issue as Canada is committing to quadruple its military budget. That means Canada buying ever more weapons and ever more Israeli weapons as well. So I think I will leave it off with that for now. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat, but we'll take questions later on in this call. And I'm really pleased to hand the mic over to Saliha with Justice for All Canada to talk a little bit more about what we're going to be organizing around the next month, which is how we can change the law to actually close the US loophole.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for this really informative and strong start, and an honor and a pleasure to be with the wonderful folks at World Beyond War, as well as all of our amazing supporters here on the call on the Zoom program. So I'll just get right to it. In order to understand the need for this next project that we're working on, which is basically a private member's bill, which has been nicknamed the No More Loopholes Act, I like to look at it as a sequence of events that brought us here. It also helps simplify the process, as well as debunk this idea that stopping atrocities with Israel is complicated. It's not. It's a very straightforward process. So as we know, Canada did join the Arms Trade Treaty in 2019. It is actually an international agreement that sets out clear rules for how countries, including Canada, must control the export of weapons. And so the Arms Trade Treaty is meant to stop weapons from being sent to places where there is real possible risk of those items being used for genocide or war crimes or any kind of serious human rights violations. So what had happened was, in order for Canada to be in line with the Arms Trade Treaty, Canada implemented its own domestic law, and that was simply called the Export and Import Permits Act. This is basically Canada's legislation that governs how export permits are granted for military goods and technology. So on paper, this should have theoretically brought Canada in line with the Arms Trade Treaty. But in practice, there were four major gaps that were left in the law. And I'm just going to go through those gaps very briefly as well. If a lot of this was definitely covered by Rachel, but I'll just talk about the technical side of things. So gap number one was basically the US exemption. Canada created what we call the General Export Permit 47, or simply just GEP 47. This means that most Canadian arms exports to the United States don't need individual permits. They don't go through a risk assessment, and they are not publicly reported. So once they end up in the United States, a lot of those Canadian parts and technology are often re-exported to countries such as Israel, as well as other nations, where they are eventually used in war crimes and atrocity crimes. The second gap is that Canadian law does not fully treat parts and components and technology the same way as complete weapons. So under the Arms Trade Treaty, if you export a part that could be assembled into a weapon, or even a technology that makes a weapon usable, it should face basically the same kind of scrutiny as the weapon itself. But Canada, unfortunately, has not fully closed that gap, which means that certain shipments are escaping this attention, and then we see them kind of going, being swept under the rug, so to say. The third gap is the use of general permits. So these are basically blanket approvals that allow entire categories of manufacturers' exports, as was explained by Rachel, without this requirement of a case-by-case basis review. So this basically undermines the premise of the Arms Trade Treaty, which normally requires governments such as Canada to check every single transfer if it's at risk for complicity. And finally, but certainly not least, Canada's law does not explicitly state that one of its purposes is to prevent Canadian arms from being used in war crimes. So the Arms Trade Treaty makes this obligation very clear. However, where Canada stopped short of writing it into the purpose of the act is where all of our efforts are born, basically. So because of these loopholes, human rights groups such as World Beyond War, the Arms Embargo Now movement, as well as all of the members, they have warned that Canada has become complicit in atrocities. And so that brings us to today's efforts, where basically the private members bill that we are discussing today, otherwise known as the No More Loopholes Act, works to respond directly to these gaps that I explained. And here is how. So right now, if a company received approval before the so-called embargo, that permit stays valid. But this new bill, or the No More Loopholes Act, would basically make it so that any old permits would expire 180 days after this law passes, meaning Canada cannot keep using past approvals as a backdoor. Second, if the No More Loopholes Act, rather, would add accountability where arms would be diverted. So, for example, if someone is convicted of illegally diverting Canadian weapons, then the courts would have to consider whether that diversion had contributed to war crimes or genocide when deciding the sentence. And third, the No More Loopholes Act would basically bring in an official end to the bill brings in end use certificates. My bad. So the third and very important, I just want to reiterate this: the No More Loopholes Act brings in end use certificates. End use certificates basically means the government receiving the weapons must provide a kind of formal document that would explain how it's being used. And it basically creates a record and makes it a lot harder for weapons to be passed on or used in ways that would violate international law in the ways that we're discussing tonight. So it is critical that we petition all of our local members of parliament and those critical decision makers in government to vote yes on the No More Loopholes Act, because in short, it would invalidate things like the GP 47. It would close U.S. exemptions. It would ensure that parts and components and technologies are treated in the same way as full weapons are treated. It would also ban general export permits for any arms. It would require every single shipment to face individual scrutiny. And it would write into Canadian legislation that our export regime must prevent Canadian weapons from contributing to any kind of war crimes. So in short, this private member's bill, sponsored by MP Jenny Kwan, as we know, or the No More Loopholes Act, it would take Canada's promises under the Arms Trade Treaty and basically put them into practice, because that wasn't done so the first time within our own law. So thank you so much. And now I'm also very happy to throw it over to Johanna Lewis from the Palestine Solidarity Network to talk about our movement's plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much for walking us through that. I know there's a lot of details there. I know, like many of you probably, I am like new to trying to change Canadian law. This isn't something I do every day, but this is actually a really exciting and important opportunity for our movements. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about why. So as Rachel talked about, a couple minutes ago, our campaign has been really laser focused on ending the Canada-Israel arms trade. And we have moved the needle. We've forced the government to do things that they never would have done without our movement pressure, and start to slow down their direct export of weapons from Canada to Israel. But as many people have said already on this call, the vast majority of Canadian-made weapons that are making it to Israel right now are going through the US. And so this private member's bill from Jenny Kwan, the No More Loopholes Act, allows us to close down that loophole and prevent that massive flood of weapons that are going from Canada to Israel through the United States. This is really a chance to make a very material difference. Unlike an opposition motion, like folks might remember from March of a couple of years ago, when there was an opposition motion that the NDP put forward, a private member's bill is actually has a material impact. It would change Canadian law if we could pass it. It allows us to actually restrict the arms exports that Canada is sending to Israel, and it could radically change the landscape of how our military exports are regulated and governed in this country. It's also a really incredible opportunity for our movement to once again force a conversation that our government doesn't want to be having. Right now we are kind of, as Rachel mentioned, over the summer, we've really been poking holes in some of the lies that the government has been telling us. The Foreign Affairs Minister this summer told us that, Canada wouldn't allow Canadian-made weapons to fuel this conflict in any way. And this private member's bill is an opportunity to really expose the ways that is, unfortunately, a lie. That Canadian weapons are continuing to fuel this conflict, and this is a really incredible opportunity to help stop that. So we think there's a lot to be done here. It's going to be a little bit of a slog trying to figure out how to actually get a bill through Parliament, and a lot of this is new to us too, but we have a lot of resources prepared to help our movements, help the organizations that many of us represent actually do meaningful and important work in the next couple of weeks to help push this bill through Parliament and maybe win it, and really actually give us a chance to make it a lot harder for Canada to continue to arm Israel's genocide, for Canadian war profiteers to continue to profit off these war crimes. This bill can be a really important site of intervention as part of a longer-term fight for a full arms embargo on Israel, and to really undermine the entanglement of Canadian and American arms manufacturing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're planning to make it happen. This is actually being tabled on Friday. So in just 2 days, Jenny Kwan is going to be introducing this bill to the House of Commons. There'll be a press conference on Friday. More details will be released, and the movement, and also the MPs themselves will get a chance to see the full text of this bill for the first time. But as Leah explained, what it really does is closes these loopholes and exemptions that are allowing weapons to continue to sneak to Israel. That's what we need to know. That's what we're fighting for with this bill. And that's why it's such an important thing to rally behind. In about a month, at the end of October, it's going to go to the House of Commons again for what's called the second reading, which is a chance for all of MPs to vote on this bill and put it into the record whether or not they support the principle of this bill, which is, do they want to close the loopholes in our arms exports or not? And that's really the kind of fight that we're focusing on. So what we're presenting tonight is kind of a 1-month game plan. We are going to be whipping the votes from the ground up, and we have really about a month to try to get as many MPs as possible across party lines, across the country, to vote yes on this bill and actually change our arms export law so that we are able to stop the export of weapons to Israel. Rachel, do you want to maybe open up our website so we can show people what we've got on offer for them? Amazing, thank you. So we are trying to make this as easy as possible for folks, and I'm just going to explain a little bit about the plan. The first step is for us to all contact our MPs. We're going to do that in as many ways as possible. We've got a handy email tool here on the website for you. We're all going to take a moment at the end of this call to make a phone call and leave a voicemail on our MPs at our MP's office. You know, you can drop by your MP's office yourself. You can talk to their staffers. You can request a meeting, all these things that we know well. What's different this time is that we actually have such a concrete, tangible ask for them. We want to push them to commit to supporting this bill. We can expose the hypocrisy of those who refuse. And we really want to keep track of who across the country is saying, yes, they will vote in favor of this private member's bill. They will take that important next step to close down these loopholes and prevent the ongoing flow of weapons to Israel. And we really are relying on you, our base, our community, our comrades, to tell us what you hear from your MPs. So we have a form here called the MP Tracker that Rachel's pointing at on the screen. That's where you go. So if you get in touch with your MP and they say, fine, yes, I will support this, or they say, I'm not so sure, or they say, absolutely not, we need to know that information. So this is really an important chance for you to share back to us about what you're hearing from your MP or from their staff so that we're able to get a sense across the country of how people are voting, and so that the public can, we're going to be launching this new tool that will allow folks to put in their postal code and get a little bit of a snapshot of where their MP is at. So this is an organizing tool too, right? It helps us figure out where our MP is at. Have they agreed to vote for this or not? Do we need to keep pushing them? Can we move on to our neighbor? Okay, great. We're just going to show us what this tool looks like. So if I put in that I lived in Vancouver East, which is Jenny Kwan's riding, it would say, lucky me, Jenny Kwan has said that she's going to vote for the No More Loopholes bill, which is awesome. And if you put in a postal code and you have an MP who has not yet made that commitment, it would tell me that as well and give me a chance to contact them and follow up and keep pushing them. So Tim Lewis here has not. But you'll note it also indicates some information about what we know about their past actions on this file. So this is an MP who hasn't yet pledged to vote for the No More Loopholes bill, which is fair because it hasn't even been tabled yet, but did previously sign on to the Arms Embargo Now demands. This is like a prime person to be pushing to vote yes on this bill. These are people who may well be among our early supporters in the Liberal caucus. So that's our first phase, is talk to our MPs, get them to try to get them to commit to vote in favor of this bill when it gets voted upon at the end of October, and let us know whenever you hear anything. Next step, if you find out, yes, your MP is planning on voting in favor of this bill, that's great, but we need more from them. We need them to help us make sure it passes. And that means that we need them to rally their colleagues. We need them to publicly support the bill, not just tell us one-on-one, but actually, put out a statement on their social media, add it to their newsletter, write a letter to their own leaders, really be public about it. And we're also looking for seconders for this bill. So especially if you have a supportive Liberal MP, so somebody who has been pretty good on Palestine, maybe signed on to our campaign earlier and has indicated support for this bill, we want to now ask them to second the bill, which allows us to throw some more cross-partisan weight behind Jenny Kwan's private member's bill. And that has to happen again before that key vote at the end of October. We don't know the exact date, but we'll find out soon. And that's really what we're focused on. If they have not indicated their support, they have not said they're going to vote for this, then we need to escalate pressure. We need to expose the hypocrisy of a government that continues to claim to be following international law, to care about human rights. It even claims that it's not arming Israel, and yet won't take this most basic common sense step to cut off this flow of arms through this massive loophole, these massive gaps in our regulatory system. So we're going to have a No More Loopholes Day of Action. It'll be in mid to late October, right before that key reading in the House of Commons, where we actually need these votes to happen. And that's our chance to take action at our MP offices across the country. We'll have more details on exactly what that's going to look like soon. But this is really a chance to force people who are on the fence to vote yes, to vote the way we need them to. And again, escalate pressure and blame and shame those MPs who refuse to vote the way we want them to really make sure that they're feeling the heat from their constituents around not supporting what is a very obvious and important solution to a huge plank of Canada's complicity in this genocide. So we're going to take questions at the end of this call. I will say that there is a toolkit also on that website that Rachel shared that includes a lot more details, talking points, steps, resources to equip us all to take action. But really the first thing that we need to do as soon as this bill gets tabled on Friday is make sure that everybody in our organizations, in our communities, in our neighborhoods knows what's at stake with this bill. This is a huge chance to materially change Canada's complicity in this genocide. And it's rare to have an opportunity like this. And actually, although I know it's a little like wonky and boring and confusing to weigh into some of this legislative stuff, it is really important. And the more that we can rally our people to come on board with us and take action and put pressure on our MPs, the more likely it is that we'll be able to win this. So I'm going to now pass it on to Emma to talk about how we're going to get started in that outreach just this weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Johanna. Just before I do, I want to speak to some of what is coming up in the chat, which I think is like incredibly relatable. So there are many, many, many people who for the past 2 years have been emailing and calling their MPs who haven't been getting a response, who are saying, you know, my MP refuses to speak on anything related to international and global affairs, will only speak to domestic issues. That is incredibly relatable. That is the case for many, many people all across the country. And yet, what I would say to all of you who are in that situation is that moments like this are an opportunity for us to reach the public and to bring more and more people in. There have been tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people all across the country that have been watching a live streamed genocide for the past 2 years and who very fairly are like, what can we possibly do about this? I feel exhausted and overwhelmed and feel as though there's nothing concrete that can be done. Opportunities like this, where we open a window and we say there is something concrete, material that can be done. We ourselves can stop entire parts from being loaded into F-35s that are dropping bombs on Palestinians in Gaza, and we have the opportunity to do that. These are opportunities for us to reach out to our neighbors, our family, our friends, to build our movement, to make it that much larger. And that's what ultimately tips the scale. It's not about appealing to the hearts and minds of these members of parliament more often than not, who oftentimes they don't want to hear from us. It's about forcing them to respond to us. And so many of these MPs who have eventually signed on, who have committed to be in support of a two-way arms embargo, or who pledged for the Vote Palestine campaign during the federal election, they were forced to do so because they looked around within their own constituency and they said, it is no longer tenable for me to refuse to not actually respond to these concerns of my constituents. And that is ultimately going to cost me my seat. It's going to cost me my political career. And so that's the calculus here. So it's not just about calling our MPs, it's about reaching out to the public and growing our movements and growing our organizations and using these moments where we have a tool, a really concrete tool at our disposal that actually makes sense to people, and bringing them in. So to that end, I saw many folks kind of talking about this at the very beginning of this call. On September 20th, so this Saturday, there will be mobilizations in nearly 70 communities all across the country to draw the line. And so these are cross-movement mobilizations that are bringing together anti-war and Palestine solidarity groups, climate justice groups, migrant rights organizations, struggles for Indigenous rights and sovereignty, and many, many, many more movements in opposition to what we have so far seen from the Carney government. Those of us on this call, have been fighting the Liberal government tooth and nail for over 2 years. We understand what it's like for our communities and our movements to be under attack. There are other movements and other organizations that are just now kind of coming into the fold and are seeing the ways that Carney is responding to them and their issues. And this is a huge opportunity for us to build cross-movement solidarity, to reach outside of, our silos, and to bring more people in, to invite more people to join us, both in the streets, but then to continue to show up, to join our meetings, and to be in long-term struggle with us. So you can find an action at, Rachel, if you can drop this in the chat, at drawtheline.world/Canada. Many actions across the country, especially in these major cities, actually have Palestine contingents that are being organized and that are meeting up in order to march together, and to be a show of force. One of the core demands of this mobilization is for a two-way arms embargo on Israel. But we're also showing up, to push back against Mark Carney's plans to massively balloon our military budget. We are saying, how dare you cut our public services and programs while funneling billions of dollars into the military? We know that that only leads to climate catastrophe. We know that that's not the way to take care of people. And so if there is a contingent for you to join, please do so. If you are in a small town or a smaller community, we've created flyers for you, which you can also find on this website, and we'll post them in the chat for you to use in order to spread the word about this private members bill. So this is an opportunity. There will potentially be, depending on where you are, there might be 50 people in the streets, there might be 10,000 people in the streets. This is a huge opportunity for us to meet people and to chat with them and get them to send letters to their MPs, to call their MPs, and to spread the word about the opportunity of this private members bill. So encourage all of you to join us in the streets on September 20th. It's going to be really incredible, and then stay plugged in and continue to kind of join an organization, and build this cross-movement solidarity, because it's going to be so crucially important in the next couple of years. I don't know who I'm passing it back to, but
thank you, Emma. I'll grab it from here. Thank you so, so much, Emma and Johanna and Saliha and Rachel. Right now, we've heard what's happening. We've heard what we have to do. So right now we act, and we need to get our MPs to vote for this bill. So we're going to end this call, and keeping in mind we still have a question and answer session at the end, but we are going to end this call by calling our MPs and using the email tool, because our pressure will only work if we are relentless. We have to keep bothering these MPs over and over and over again. So you can find your MPs on the ourcommons.ca website. My MP is Bardish Chagger, and I'm going to actually call her on this webinar with you. And there is a script that we have and the email toolkit as well, in the email toolkit, and a tool to also email. Feel free to use this in your own words. We just want to kind of push the message forward that we need you to vote for this bill, and it is integral that you vote for this bill. And we generally don't have time to go through the niceties with these MPs. We need them to vote ASAP. So I'm going to call my MP right now. Feel free to call your MP, look them up, and let's call them together. Every single moment matters. I mean this so, so, so genuinely. Every single moment matters. So let's ensure that we are calling. I can see a few of you folks in the chat. Let me see those phones. Here is my phone, and I'm going to call my MP right now. So let's do this together. I'm not seeing phones. Pull out those phones.
We have reached the constituency office of the Honorable Bardish Chagger, Member of Parliament for the riding of Waterloo. Our office is open Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please leave a message with your full name, residential address, phone number, and a brief description of your situation or you can send us an email at bardish.chager@paro.gc.ca. Thank you. At the tone, please record your message.
Hello, this message is for Bardish Chager. I am calling as a concerned resident of Waterloo who lives in your riding to ask for your support for an important bill being introduced on Friday to stop the flow of weapons to Israel. Despite the Canadian government's promises to stop arming the assault on Gaza, Canada continues to send weapons to Israel. Increasingly, this is happening via a major loophole in Canadian law, allowing Canadian weapon parts to go to Israel through the US without having to have a permit or be regulated. That's why I was so pleased to learn that MP Jenny Kwan will be introducing the No More Loopholes Act this Friday. This bill would bring Canada's laws in line with the Global Arms Trade Treaty and ensure Canadian exports are not being complicit in genocide or other war crimes. It's been horrifying to witness Canada's continuous allowance of or to continue to allow the export of military goods to a state that has slaughtered tens of thousands of civilians over the last 2 years. It is time to end Canada's direct complicity in one of the most extreme moral crises of our time. As your constituent, I am calling on you to support the No More Loopholes bill. Thank you. So as you can see, you are able to leave your number. You don't have to, but it would be really, really great to keep bothering them and have them call you back because we want to know where they stand and we want to name them and shame them if they don't support this bill. So in the meantime, go ahead and email your MP. Keep on bothering them. We have to keep up the pressure as much as possible. So I will give you all 2 minutes to make the call, send out the email, and I will sit here and wait while I do. And while in the meantime, I will actually go and I will email my MP Bardish Chager right now. So please go ahead and email and call. I'm seeing a few more dones in the chat. Go ahead, keep calling. I will give it 1 more minute. Let's see, 10, 20, 30, 40. There's 298 people on this call. There's 300 of us here. Let's see dozens and dozens of done. Let's flood those inboxes and build up that pressure. Okay, I see 5 more. Let's keep going. I will give it 1 more minute and then we will close off. And reminder that there is a Q&A session at the end. Okay, while folks are still calling, and thank you all who called, let's keep building up that pressure. I am going to just slowly transition us into our Q&A session, but it's just a reminder, we have 1 month to turn up the pressure, 1 month to close the most dangerous weapons pipeline in this country, 1 month to confront every MP who stays silent and who stays complicit while Gaza burns with the weapons that are leaving our country. We've already forced and exposed this government and made them admit their complicity. We forced them to pause some exports, but the deadliest channel, the US loophole, is still wide open, and this is our chance to shut it down. So contact your MP. Track their response. We want to name them and we want to shame them if they are not endorsing this bill. Share the toolkit. join the day of action, which we will be announcing soon, and then push them to vote yes and to second the bill. This fight that we're fighting right now is not symbolic. Every bullet, every shipment, every loophole, it all matters. And this is also a fight that we can win. Pick up the phone, flood their inboxes, and make it impossible for them to look away. Because no MP should be able to say or have the audacity to say that they didn't know. Not anymore. We're going to come for every vote, and we won't stop until there's no more loopholes, no more exceptions, and no more excuses, and no more Canadian weapons fueling this genocide. We know what's happening and we know how to stop it. So please, please, please ensure that you are doing everything that you can. And thank you all for joining us. And I will pass it on to the incredible Rachel from World Beyond War to take the Q&A session.
Huge thank you to you, Shada. And thank you to everyone for like, I know the calling and leaving voicemails for MP can be awkward, is maybe not people's favorite activity yet, but it means a lot that people were willing to do this with us. I'm going to be trying to follow questions as they're submitted in the chat, but I wrote down a couple that have come up a lot. The first one is a process question. So I'm just going to try to be clear again about where exactly we're at, because it is confusing. So today is Wednesday. The bill is being introduced on Friday. So in 2 days, we don't have any information yet on any MPs' stances on this bill because the bill hasn't been introduced yet and they don't even know about it yet. Us phoning them about it today is us getting ahead of the game and making sure they know this is super important to us. Stay tuned for this bill on Friday. Us emailing them today is doing the same. The only way that we are going to know where each MP stands on this bill is because of you telling us. We're not going to magically know where all 300 and I've forgotten the numbers of MPs stand on this bill until you let us know. My MP wrote back to my email. He said he's going to vote for the bill. My MP wrote back to this email and said a whole bunch of nothing. I have no clue where he stands. My MP wrote me back, answered my phone call, and said, no, she won't vote for something like this. You are going to find that, or maybe you see what your MP has posted on social media. Maybe you find out in some other way. The second you get any kind of answer back from your MP, we need you to go back to the website at armsembargonow.ca/no more loopholes and fill out that MP tracker form. You will be the one to tell us, hey, actually, my MP says that she's going to support this bill. Then we will add that info to the tracker that we just gave you a sneak peek of on this call. That's where you're going to get to put in your postal code or your writing name, find your MP, and see what their stance is. That is going to be helpful for everyone else in your riding who wasn't on this call but wants to push for this bill. They can then go on and say, hey, is my MP on side? Oh, no, they're not. We need to organize. It's also going to be helpful for the whole campaign, because if we're going to win this in the next month, we're going to need to be tracking these votes. We're going to need to know where we stand, and we're going to be counting these pledges as they come in. And we're going to be giving those updates to all of you as well. Like, okay, we've got 30 Liberals on site. Okay, we've got 50. We're going to be tracking these numbers to make sure that we can win this. So we need that information from all of you on where your MP stands, and we need all of us to be pushing our MPs to vote for this. So armsembargonow.ca/no more loopholes is where all the tools that we talked about on this call are, and where that tracker tool will be once we launch it after the bill is actually introduced in the House of Commons. But right there on that site is the tool to email your MP, is the toolkit so you can be campaigning and explaining to everybody about why this bill matters, is that phone script, and is a whole bunch of other information like flyers that folks should print out and bring to their Draw the Line rally on Saturday explaining this bill. We've got social media posts. We've got a whole bunch of other things. The other question that I saw that is such a fair question is, where is the French version of this site? It is coming very soon. We rushed to get these materials out for this English language webinar, but we will have the exact same site in French out very, very soon. We did the same thing for their last report in July. There was an English site and a French site. The same thing for previous actions. We'll have that for this as well. And our apologies that it wasn't ready for tonight, but stay tuned very soon. This good bill is absolutely going to need support from all kinds of MPs across Quebec, not least of which the Bloc MPs. So yes, French toolkit needed. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the other chat, but if Emma or Johanna or Saliha, if you see any question that you want to chime in on, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to quickly respond to one question, which is about seconders. So again, Jenny Kwan is the one who is introducing this private members bill. Then you can have up to 20 MPs who second the bill. As much as possible, we know that the other 6 NDP MPs are supportive of this bill. This is consistent with their party policy. And so a major kind of effort for us in the coming weeks is to get as much cross-party support as possible in that list of seconders to really set the tone of this is a bill that is gathering support across parties. So if you're based in Quebec, if you have a Bloc MP, if you have a Liberal MP that has been supportive of an arms embargo, that has signed on to the Vote Palestine campaign, we really want to get as many Liberal MPs as possible to second this bill in order to really like set the tone within their own caucus.
So if you want to picture a flow chart in your head, there's you at the top reaching out to your, maybe we'll make this and share this later, but there's you reaching out to your MP. Is your MP going to support this bill? If you get a yes, wonderful. I'm so glad. Will you also be a seconder on this bill? And will you share publicly your support for this bill? Like, that's great that you're secretly going to vote for it, but hey, why don't you share it in your newsletter? Why don't you share it on social media? And why don't you become an official seconder on the bill? Your MP doesn't answer you about this bill, that's okay. We're going to keep emailing you. We're going to keep phoning you. Ultimately, we're going to have in-person days of action before the final vote on this bill. We're going to get an answer from you, and we're going to try to convince you to vote for this. You get a no, honestly, same. We're going to try to convince you that actually you should vote yes for this bill. Regardless of what answer you get from your MP, go back to the website and you fill out the form so that everyone else also knows what answer you got back from your MP. Hopefully that is that's helping to clarify the process a bit. All that's happening this Friday is it just being introduced into the House of Commons. The real vote that we're mobilizing towards is going to be in about a month, exact date to be determined, like Johanna said, late October, when there's the second reading of the bill. That's when they debate the bill, and that's where they do the vote about whether they're going to move forward to try to make this head towards an actual law or whether it's just going to die right there, this bill.
I saw another person with a question in the chat about not feeling like articulate enough to do face-to-face meetings with MPs. I hear you. It's like nerve-wracking and it can feel tricky to kind of speak to people with that kind of power. There are hopefully some of the language in the toolkit is useful for helping you feel more equipped and fluent in some of this stuff. And we will have, the flyer that's out there. There's like lots of resources on our online that kind of explain what that US loophole is and why this bill is a useful response to it. I will say that I think the line that I'm planning on leading with when I like bring this to my MP's office, later this week, is that would be consistent with the statements that your government has already made. So I have a Liberal MP. The Liberals have many times said that they don't want to be sending weapons to Israel. We know that's not true, but they keep saying it. And closing this loophole like helps bring them in line with their own stated commitment. So I think there's ways that we can try to use their own language against them, really try to make this a common sense, obvious next step and try to make for as many MPs across the country, make it both like morally necessary and also, as Emma was saying, like make it impossible for them to ignore and impossible for them to ignore us, make them feel the power that we have as their like organized constituents.
I'm seeing a lot of questions about, is this the right tactic? What about other tactics? What about doing X? What about doing Y? The answer is yes. Yes, yes, yes. There has never been a point in the Arms Embargo Now campaign where we have said, only meeting your MP, only sending this report, only pushing for this bill is the only thing you should be doing. Absolutely not. This is a campaign and a demand that Canada stop being complicit in genocide that belongs to everyone. And we always encourage everyone to do what you are able to do that makes most sense. Under the push for an arms embargo in Israel, there have been dozens and dozens of factory blockades across the country. Folks showing up and literally not letting the workers in the door that day to make weapons going to Israel. That's part of pushing for an arms embargo. There have been people who have been flying kites in the park and having an arms embargo festival. There have been people literally doing every possible thing to push this demand forward. And I think that part of the strength of this movement is everyone organizing in their community with the resources that they have available, all towards the same goal. And the organizations that are privileged to have a position where they're having private meetings with government officials and are able to lobby in the House of Commons that they are also demanding an arms embargo in those meetings is also part of the same pushing this demand forward to win. So and I'm seeing some shout outs in the chat to the various workers who've taken various stances, the hot cargo proposals that have been passed and resolutions that have been passed by various unions and workers to refuse to work in this industry. Yes, 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 and yes. All these things are really important. We're pushing this bill right now because this is 1 month where where many of us are going to really focus on changing Canadian law, but absolutely not to the exclusion of everything else. And this fight, obviously, for an arms embargo and for a free Palestine will obviously continue regardless of what happens in October. Yeah, maybe maybe I'll stop there. I'm seeing a lot of other questions coming out in the chat as well. Oh, yes. The other thing I was going to say about tactics that relates to a bunch of the questions had to do with other types of legal approaches. And yes, there are several lawsuits ongoing that our allies and members of the campaign who are movement lawyers are pushing forward. There's one specifically that is suing the Canadian government in federal courts for not following their own laws around arming Israel. So those strategies are happening at the same time that we're trying to change Canadian law.
Okay, I think that's most of them. Yeah, just want to be clear, like, reach out to your MP as much as possible. If you've emailed them once, don't hesitate to email them again. As Johanna said, it's often most effective if you also are able to like personalize these emails. So even getting people together, kind of spending time sitting down together and personalizing your emails is also a great way to bring others in. Calling them, personalizing that phone script. There will be many sort of phone banks to come and other opportunities in order to take action together and to bring people in. So please, yeah, watch for all of that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to everyone for showing up today, for showing up to demand an arms embargo over the past 2 years. I can't wait to see so many people on the streets on Saturday at 65 actions cross country and counting when we draw the line for Palestine and in solidarity with other movements cross country too, who are also, like Emma said, standing up to really the terrible start that this government has had in attacking all of us. We will be following up by email with the links and the resources that we mentioned today, and we'll do a big social media announcement on Friday when the bill itself is introduced to get everyone up to speed on what you all heard tonight. But once again, this campaign belongs to everyone, and truly the only way this bill is gonna pass is by all of us organizing hard to make it happen. Good night, all.